Today's episode is brought to you by our company, NanoChomp Marketing Strategy and Analytics. We help product and marketing teams solve problems and experience growth using data and approachable AI. Visit nanochomp.com to learn more. On this episode of Soundbites, we sit down with Ashely Duque Kienzle. Ashely is the founder of wellness company Almma Health that's making it easier for people to make healthier choices using AI and behavioral change science. She has a background in product management, working at some of the large companies such as Amazon and Facebook, and it was a really great conversation, insightful from beginning to end.
Yeah, I loved her background. She said it was circuitous, but I actually think it all made sense when she talked about how she loves behavior change and the impact that tech is having on us. Like it was a perfect marriage to me, and I can see where she got to where she is today. Super energetic, super smart, just a blast to talk to. So I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of great topics. It was really fun, really insightful. And to your point, she started off thinking she wanted to be in the medical space, ended up in the product space, and then circled back into wellness. So really, it came all together for her, and really fascinating, great background, and really grateful we had her on.
Enjoy.
Here's Ashely. Hey everyone, on today's episode of Soundbites, we have a really great guest, Ashely Duque Kienzle. She's founder of a wellness company called Almma Health that's making it easier for people to make healthier choices using a combination of AI and behavioral change science. Before venturing into the wellness space, Ashely worked on optimizing data and AI products, as well as experiences for companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Capital One. Ashely, it's really great to have you on the show today, and tell us about your background. How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, great to be here. So I like to say it's quite a circuitous route. Certainly wasn't what I thought I was going to be doing. I originally thought I was going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. But I hate blood, and I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm in school until I'm 35, I'm going to scream. And I actually don't want to just be, staring at operating on someone, but actually chatting with people and doing things. So I studied math and science. I've always loved math and science. Studied that for undergrad, and then ended up just happenstancely, really, because I was ready to be finished with undergrad. Took master's classes my last semester of undergrad, and then but in DC. So I went to Hopkins. So I was in Baltimore, and I was like, okay, all ready to be out of Baltimore. And towards a master's in behavior change, focused on behavior change. And randomly enough, that got me into technology strategy. So if you think about really adoption of technology, you think about back in the day, so this was, gosh, almost 20 years ago, back then when we were developing technologies, instead of actually thinking about, hey, maybe we should talk to the users, we were kind of making tech. Some companies still do this today, but we were kind of making tech and saying, how do we get people to use this? Well,
Sure.
over time we figured out actually talking to the users, doing some design, that kind of stuff actually works better. So I got into really looking at strategy, looking at integration. That was when like social media was starting to be a thing, and companies were chatting with users through social media, and they had this horrible disparate experience where you'd have a chat on Facebook or whatever, and then you'd go to their office or whatnot, and they couldn't find you. So I did a lot of that work, and that's how I got into the data space, really, around disparate systems, how do we unify and how do we invest in creating a seamless experience for users. And then that brought me into product management. So from tech strategy into product management with data products, some of the early pieces around AI. So trying to match across those disparate host systems. How do you do that matching, right? And then that's when I was at Capital One, where there was fraud detection starting to happen, with anomaly detection, all that good stuff. And then I went to Amazon, where I really got into AI, working on trend prediction, offer optimization, and a lot of kind of different stuff there. And then I wanted to move to Europe. So I was looking at a variety of different places, and even 5-6 years ago now, it was still pretty hard. Like AI wasn't as pervasive in Europe as it was in the US. So I was, in order to get sponsored, because that's what you need to work over in Europe or anywhere else, I suppose, I had to go with a big company. So I ended up going to Meta to work on their community integrity space.
Got it.
and super interesting. We can always get into more of that. And again, another type of AI, looking more at like behavioral patterns, looking at graphs, all that kind of stuff. Of course, using natural language processing, computer vision, blah blah blah. And then got back into the health space. So worked at Babylon for a bit, another company called Changing Health, and then helped Changing Health go through a sale, and felt like, okay, now is the time for me to start my own company. And I've always been really passionate about behavior change, so it made sense to to work on a product that helps solve those problems.
What's really fascinating about your background, I want to dive into a lot of aspects of that. But for me, it hits really close to home because my sister is going into her senior year at Michigan State in psychology, focused on behavior change. And
Oh wow, that's amazing.
her initial path too was like, I want to go into help people and I want to go into clinical and thinking about how that would look, but didn't
Yeah,
realize there was even an opportunity for, well, have you considered working in software to be able to impact more people? You can impact billions of
definitely.
people's lives by optimizing different things. And
Yep.
that isn't presented to people in school. They don't know that's an option. You almost have to
No.
stumble on that. It's like everything you touch
Yep.
is designed. Every application you use is
100%.
designed. And people don't
Yep.
think that, right?
No. And I would say to an extent, I'm not, companies are, don't take this as I'm saying companies are evil, but companies are manipulating people for their business outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about with social media, or you think about with food, or you think about any way that you're interacting with technology, there's a goal that the company is trying to achieve, and where the person fits into that goal. Behavior change oftentimes is used to help direct those, how do we get people more engaged for positive and sometimes unintended negative consequences too.
Sure. We call those externalities, right?
And I think especially with social media, you're hearing a lot of conversation about like, what are the ethical implications of doing something like that? And how do we navigate around that, knowing that, companies have motives and agendas, and then like, how do we think about these things? How should we feel about companies doing this? Not to say that we're going to solve all these problems, but I am just curious, since you've worked at so many of these large companies that we interact with every day. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I was saying to someone recently, I think we all get more cynical as we get older.
Yes.
But I think that's just a common pattern, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen things inside companies that I certainly didn't like, right? I think, and I personally am, just like put it out there, I don't believe that the way capitalism is functioning right now is the right go-term, long-term, well, no, or even short-term for that matter, way that we should be, incentivizing businesses, et cetera, because businesses aren't incentivized to actually care about the other externalities, or to care about, the environmental impact or the social impact. That's because they're not set up that way, right? And again, I think when we think about what are businesses, what are their duties, right? Most of their duties are their stockholders, their shareholders, right? Whatever it may be. So their decisions are going to be based on that, which is profit driven most of the time, right? So I think there has to be a jiggering, for lack of a better term, a reevaluation. And I really think now is the right time, because of AI coming in and disrupting so much, well, not quite coming in, but with much more force now because of the LLMs, disrupting the way that really life, I think, has been for quite some time, et cetera, and the way that we will go. It's a good time to discuss that. I think incentives have to be shifted. I don't think pure regulation is the 100% right way, but I do think some regulation has to be there, because again, what I saw at Meta, I didn't see as much of the negative side on Amazon, because I was actually focused on sellers. I wasn't focused on the retail side that was doing some of the other stuff that people tend to think is not so great. But I do think that there's a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, and the vulnerable, particularly when you think about social media, but really as we look at like just technology in general, are young people, oftentimes the disadvantaged, etc. And again, companies aren't incentivized to make decisions that care for that because of the short term attention.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm super passionate about this topic, so I could go on and on about diversity's importance and like how you need more diverse voices in the room and how that's also not incentivized, unfortunately.
And I think when we talk about this, Lauren and I talk about it a lot. There's a stark difference between like pure Adam Smith capitalism and what you might call cronyism, where
Yeah.
not only are incentives skewed, but power structures are skewed to continue to create a
Definitely.
feedback loop with
Yep.
those systems. But I think, you have applications now that a lot of kids are using, like TikTok, and those algorithms are designed to keep somebody on platform versus change that person's
Yep.
outcome for the better.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And then nobody
Yep.
ever
Exactly.
thinks about what happens when someone they don't like is in control of that algorithm. So like all these things, these balances become really important because at some point,
Yeah.
someone you don't necessarily want to be in control will be. And if the certain precedents are
Yeah.
set, then what?
And I think there's always the argument that is coming from both sides. Again, it's not a one side or the other side thing here.
Yeah.
I think the thing that people forget when they say like, oh, I don't want government regulation, is that it's a smaller group of people right now deciding what's on social media than the government. It's a very, very small group of people, like 10 at a company, right? Who are
Yeah.
ultimately deciding what the policies that dictate what's allowed to be on, and then subsequently, again, like building the algorithm is different, it's more than 10 people, but like what the policies that are dictating what actually can be said, what can be shared, all of those things. And then also when you think about TikTok, the policies are often built just for one country, and the nuances in another country are not usually cared for from like what I'm aware of, my knowledge. I don't know how TikTok's algorithms work or how they do their policies, but I know from other companies.
It does feel like, an unintended consequence of technology is that the power dynamic has shifted, where to your point, like 10 folks at a company almost have more influence and power than the government. It's kind of wild to think about. And then with that in mind, like how do you regulate? How do you get a hold on that when the other team has has more power and influence on society? It's kind of
A
wild.
handful of unelected officials get
Mhm.
influence onto
Yeah,
what billions of people see and do. Yeah.
exactly. And with zero transparency, by the way.
Yeah, they don't have to. They
Like
don't have to provide
most
it.
people know, and most people don't realize that. That's what I mean. I was flabbergasted when I went to the company and I was like, sorry, what? Like literally this goes up to here, and this is majority white people, like Western white people, right? So I mean, coming like that look like me, right? That except for most of them are men. That like have no concept. It's not their fault. That's their background, right? But like haven't, they probably haven't lived in a third world country. They probably haven't had the same experiences of bias or anything like that. And again, like that's biases is part of the way our brain works, but like such a small subset literally deciding what, like you said, 3 billion people are exposed to and what resources go behind the problems that they are tackling and what they pay attention to. So, I mean, I thought a lot about this in like, how do we democratize this? Like, how do we actually create a way that people are more involved? And some people would say, oh, it's like what you're liking, it's what you're viewing, etc. But there's still underlying, again, it goes back to that. And there's of course all these arguments of like, oh, but the paper was like that and da da da. And I'm not saying like, oh, it was perfect at one point and suddenly it's not. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I
Mhm.
think again, like now is the time for us to think about, as we're introducing more and more automation, more and more systems that are automated without a lot of transparency. Like, how do we make sure that we're putting into that systems and guardrails that are protecting everyone?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And especially as we rely more and more on these tools and there's more automation and large language models get to decide what comes to the front. Even on Google searches, we talk about this a lot
Mhm.
because Bard, if you have on the beta version of Google, Bard is the
Mhm.
top responses now, right? It's all AI generated.
Yep.
And that's going to be
Yep.
how people experience the world. And so like the ability to change narratives, and it doesn't happen immediately. Lauren knows this concept better than I do. What is it, Occam's razor, where things just continue to, the window just keeps
Is that the
pushing
Overton
over.
window?
Overton window, that's what it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mm.
Yeah, it happens over time, right? It moves slowly over
Mhm.
time, and it's when you can amplify it with tools like AI, especially when such a small subset of people get to actually do it, becomes interesting. And Lauren and I
Yeah.
subscribe to like open source transparency, open source
Mhm.
software, because that can
Yeah.
help mitigate a lot of that over time. So
Yep.
you navigated the big corporate world, you got into the wellness
Yeah.
space, and then you started
Mhm.
your own business. So let's talk about the journey from corporate America and the differences between big corporate
Yeah.
America to smaller wellness startups.
Yeah. So I pivoted from big corporate in first into like scale up, then more to like startup, and then to my own. I think I'm one of those. I'm a calculated risk taker, so I've lived in 16 cities, but I wanted to make sure that when I went into my own startup, and I've been told like women are more like this, but I actually think it's more personality than necessarily gender. But I don't know. Like I wanted to make sure that I had learned and really prepared myself to do it well, so that I wasn't going in with like a big gap in knowledge where, I messed
Yeah.
up, not just for myself, but like for the users and for anyone who had invested in the company, not just financially, but, supporting it, etc. So I wanted to really experience, okay, I've seen big, I've seen a scale up, I've seen a startup, so I could make my own mistakes, and learn from the mistakes that I saw before. And one of the things I found frustrating at big tech was how little influence I had on culture and on like strategy and direction. And that when I did disagree, unfortunately, like that wasn't normally,
Received.
encouraged. Yes, exactly. It wasn't like, oh yes, please give this woman a blowhorn, because I would have taken it. I promise you. They were like, please make her stop. So anyway, the I that was one of the reasons why I switched to like the scale up startup, because strategy is one of my strengths, and I love doing it. So I wanted to be doing more of that. And then I saw a lot. I saw just like the juxtaposition of the difference between working in big, and a lot of people in startups or scale ups haven't necessarily worked in big tech, right? So, or not even big tech, right? Big companies. So they know really well how to like execute, how to get from 0 to 1, 5, 10, whatever. But they don't always necessarily understand the implications of what that is longer term. So one of the examples I always use is Amazon's catalog. So we were trying to do trend prediction, we were trying to do size prediction, and you know back in the day in particular, you needed to, and you still do to an extent, right? To do predictions, you need to normalize, right? So you
Yeah.
couldn't say like, oh, this t-shirt is a small, but we have 800 size categories, and none of them, like the small in America is like an extra large in China, right? Like, so we can't do predictions off of this if it's not normalized. And there were I guess no one ever realized like, hey, you know what we need? Some data schema. Hello, right? So
Uh,
half like, but because when they were building it, the catalogs was guess for what? Up. And then no one put any guardrails as they grew around, and literally anyone could go in and create a new category. Well, that's horrible for data, right? Like that
yeah,
is
yeah.
not helpful, even remotely. You got strings everywhere with like 20 characters that are supposed to be size. What? Like, how do I even get it right? So, but if you have never seen all the pain that comes from later on dealing with that, or like what actually is running well, and how the decisions that you make early impact later on, it's really hard to see those like unintended consequences, because you think like, oh, but I'm not going to take the extra 3 minutes literally, because oftentimes it's really not that hard to throw in a data schema at the beginning, right? Or like, I'm not going to take the extra hour to create a process when we want to add extra columns into the catalog or whatever, right? That literally, if you know, or you talk to someone who knows, I would be like, spend the freaking hour, right? Like, you are literally saving. No ML scientist wants to clean data. Okay, not no, but most data scientists are like, yeah, can't wait. You know, like that is not the part of the job they want to do. So
the pre-processing part is the worst. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, yay. I mean, I do love finding patterns in it. Like, oh, I didn't think about. Like, one thing when we were doing style production at Amazon, we hadn't even thought about until we did interviews, was that material type mattered in making a recommendation to someone of like what they could actually use as a useful recommendation. Anyway, I digress. So I wanted to like experience those different pieces, and then I wanted to see and learn from the mistakes. And so I saw, okay, you're iterating quickly. I actually felt that there was a lot more like verbosity in scale ups too than even in some of the, well, because you're held more accountable as you get bigger, right? Yeah. Like, and so there's not, you can't get away with as much hand waviness. You have audits, you have a lot of people around that are, you know, that kind of know the different things. So anyway, it was a really good learning experience, and I was only in scale up to start up for probably like 3 years or so. And then I realized, okay, nope, still not having the influence that I want, still not like directing as much. And quite frankly, I don't want to have to like own all the bad decisions that the people before me made, especially coming to like ethical choices, data choices, blah, blah, blah. And of course I had a vision also for my own company. And now I just have to like own my own stupid choices. And then I really can't blame anyone but myself.
That's part of the challenge when you have a process person or you have a product manager that comes into a business that was historically, let's say mavericky, like running a little bit fast. That person ends up becoming the adult that has to manage and, you know, mitigate all of the other decisions before it and actually productize it, which is which isn't a remarkably fun role a lot of times, right? Because you have a lot of accountability for previous choices, and you don't have a lot of the people aren't celebrating you putting a fence up to try and direct traffic.
And you know, it's interesting. The people who aren't celebrating you are the people that are your level and above. It's not your team. Because your team, from what I found, I have one experience where I came in and I was like, this, you're saying you're doing AI. This is not AI. This is like a decision tree, my friend, not AI. But so of course they were like not happy that I was saying that, for one. And then I had to completely like refocus the team. And at first there was consternation, but then they were like, thank you so much. We're finally getting stuff out there that like actually matters, that's driven, but that was not appreciated by this, like horizontally and something more, because it's painful, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's and it's a tough transition to make, you know, like when you start putting more structure on things, it's tricky. And you bring people in from the outside that weren't there at the beginning. It's tricky. It's tough to navigate.
Totally. I also think you said something like it seems so obvious now that you said it, but it was pretty insightful. It's like when you work at these scale ups and these startups, if they haven't worked at a larger organization, they don't even know really what guardrails to put in place to make it, you know, more sustainable down the road. And so now you having that experience, you're able to say like, it just takes an hour. But when you don't even know what to put in and how long it takes, there's like, do this thing that's right here in front of me, right in front of my face. And I feel like that's so relatable to so many folks in smaller companies and startups, because they don't have that knowledge that you definitely had the benefit of having.
Which I think is why advisors can really play a great role if you use them the right way. As well as why I think it's so, a lot of companies right now building AI, or even building on top of LLMs, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
I had a chat with someone yesterday and he's like, this, and this. And I was like, whoa, like, what about this, and this? Have you thought about the ethical parts of this? Have you thought about this? And he was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. This was so helpful, because I didn't even think about that. And it's like, it's not because he's a bad person. It's not because he doesn't care. It's the opposite. It's because he has no like understand. It's not his fault. He's never worked in AI before.
No exposure.
And people who are trained in pure AI, even in like PhD, aren't always studying the ethical implications and haven't necessarily actually deployed something into the ethers where things blow up because it's an AI. It's not pure software. It's not the same. There are like there's things that you can't, especially with black box models, right? Like you can't dissect it. And there's going to be things that come up. So like, how do you put guardrails in place ahead of time to say, okay, either flag this immediately, like don't allow for this. How can you actually look into the data to make sure that you like a representative data sample is often not a data sample that's actually going to get you equal results. It's just representative, right? If it's not big enough, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same outputs, right? But these are things like he was thinking about building a model, and he's like, okay, I could get these things from YouTube or whatever. And I was like, but how do you know there's not bias in those YouTube videos? Because even the underlining, even if you trust the people, there are subtleties in language that are racist that we don't really know just from looking at text, or that we don't necessarily, that somebody subconsciously, I sometimes say things that I'm like, oh my God, that was rude. Like, why would, I don't believe that. Where did that come from? Right? Like, oh, like I've had to, pull my foot out of my mouth and be like, I'm really sorry. That is not what I meant. But if somebody's taking it, the model doesn't know that I was being an idiot, right? Or that I would have whatever, right? But I think, again, it's like this, that's where I think right now, advisors and AI and like, it's so important for people like you guys to like me who have built and seen these things out in the wild to say like, okay, wait, what about these little facets?
Sure.
Anyway,
you don't like those things you consider. Like there's an interesting thought exercise someone I know does, and it's they'll say, okay, it proves this exact conversation. It's like, well, name a city, pick any city in the world and name it, and I'll give it to you. Just pick a city, random city.
Tokyo.
There you go. Okay. Why didn't you say Manistee, Michigan? You probably didn't even know that a city existed. Yeah. No, so that wasn't even an option for you, right? Like of all the options that you had, that one that is a very real option for somebody else is not even an option for you to consider or even say. Now it is. Now if someone ever asks you that question again, you might do it just because you've been primed with that answer. But that's interesting too. And that's your YouTube example. Like a lot of the data on YouTube ends up being optimized to perform on YouTube. Like the questions that get posed are performing on YouTube. So now your bias is actually YouTube's algorithm presenting itself through your new model, which is kind of fascinating when you think about it.
It's
and so
like, interesting.
Yeah, you end up taking that and amplifying it over and over and over again. In the financial world, it's how things get over leveraged and collapse eventually. But it's this fascinating thought exercise that I think about every time we build something. But going from the scale ups, now you're in a place where you're like, I want to build things that I'm passionate about, where I'm the last person that gets to stamp the decision on it. And I'm really loving the wellness space. So that was really top of mind for you. And that's how you you put together Almma Health.
And what about the wellness space really resonated with you?
So so my dad had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, when I was younger. He died when I was 12, and I saw the impact, like both the broken healthcare system, right, for one, in America, as well as the impact that had on me and my brother, my mom, etc. And so I think subconsciously, and that was kind of why I was originally wanting to get to health. It was like, I want to protect children from ever going through that trauma and that pain. There's something you can do. Well, they don't know what causes ALS, but like basically my dad was super healthy. There was like, there was nothing that he did to get this, right? He wasn't a smoker and didn't drink, none of that stuff. Right. But so to me, in order to help people live their best selves, be for their children and for themselves, a big part of that is health. And that's holistic, integrated health. So what you eat, how you move, your interactions with other people. For women, our hormones, all of these different facets. Men obviously have hormones as well, but like they're not quite as cyclical monthly as
Sure.
women have. Like all these different factors really impact our ability to like live and be our best selves. And so behavior change. And because I also think that there is something we can do that we can control that like a lot of other spaces we don't have a lot of control over. So unfortunately, like we don't have control over the manufacturing food process, but we do have control over like getting up and going for a walk even when we don't want to. We can't control our a lot of other factors, right? A lot of people can't control, unfortunately, their jobs or the way they're, we're all at home. We're super blessed, right? That we're able to work in that manner. Not everybody can, but there are little choices that they can make, but it's hard. It's really hard to change behavior. And so I want to help make that easier for people. And then the other aspect of it is the environmental impact. So we also give some directional information on like what's healthier for the environment, because that's also quite tied to health and like long term, even more and more as we think about the environment, climate change changing. I mean, there was just another study that came out that showed how horrible plastics are.
Sure.
It's impacting baby weight, right? So that is tied to plastics, tied to like the environment, tied to ultimately human health. So I'm really passionate about helping people because I know it's really hard, but I also feel it's really important. And it's really a way for us to try to get towards like living our best self.
I think the plastics in the environment are fascinating. That's a whole nother topic that we could go down forever, but not just plastic bottles, but like microplastics, things that are in your water supply that even if you're filtering it, is still making it into your body and getting captured by your system and your liver, and it impacts your hormonal health. And what's crazy is even if you do your best to eliminate it and do your best to, you're educated and you can control your own environment, you still can't control how much you're exposed to. And traditionally, it hasn't been in front of everyone's mind as much as it is today, which is great, right? The timing's good.
Exactly.
What's the saying? It's like the best time to plant a tree is 50 years ago. Second best time is right now. So doing everything you can now to try and make those impacts. And you're starting right now with a focus on food, right?
Yep. At restaurants in particular.
Yeah. So walk us through that.
Yeah. So one of the hardest places to make healthy choices is at a restaurant. You don't have a lot of control over what's on the menu. You also are often really distracted. You haven't planned in most cases, right? So it's not like you've made a menu at the beginning of the week and you're like making healthy decisions about what you're going to purchase and whatnot. You're sitting down. You have a limited amount of time to make a decision. There's often noise. You're probably with someone, right? Hopefully you're, maybe not. I mean, I enjoy eating on my own too, but you have to look at the menu and make a quick decision. We actually can only hold about 3 things in our mind at one time, as in like 3 menu options, right? Not to mention we can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you're trying to have a conversation or your kids are pulling on you or the waiter or waitress is coming up, the server, is coming up because they're trying to do their job, right? Saying, have you figured out what you want? We tend to make impulsive decisions based on what we know or what we know we like instead of based on what's probably healthiest for us. And we don't always have the information that we need. So we tend to choose the burger and fries, which actually isn't healthy for us and it's not healthy for the environment. So what we're doing is narrowing down, you don't even have to open the menu. We're narrowing down the choices and we're trying to help get you to make a healthy choice and get back to the conversation, get back to living in the moment and experiencing whatever you're doing at that restaurant. So we're using AI to do that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to jump in, but you were also looking at when people have different types of diets, when people are like, oh, this person's on keto, this person is lactose intolerant, this person has celiac, you immediately narrow all those options down versus making somebody hunt for it, right?
Exactly. So you answer 2 questions when you download the app or sign up is how do you eat? So that could be vegan, that could be keto, like you said, that could be gluten, like intolerant, basically. We don't do anything that's like you could get an allergic reaction because we don't want to be liable for that. We still want you to tell the server, hey, I have this, whatever it may be, right? And then your no-go foods. So I don't like cucumbers. I don't know why, I just don't. But if like the cucumber salad was the most healthy and environmentally friendly option, I'm not going to choose it because I don't like cucumbers. So we then narrow down to the top 3 choices. Oftentimes there are only 3, depending on, if you're vegan, unless you're at a vegan restaurant. Normally there aren't as many options, but you just still don't want to siphon through like, what about this? They're going to replace this, blah, blah, blah. So we just give you the top 3 options on how you eat. So you literally open the app. We say, hey, it looks like you're at Italy in Manhattan using your geolocation. You say, yep. And then we pop up the top 3 based on how you eat, your no-go, and like the healthiest based on that type. So like just balanced diet is based on, the FDA's recommendations. And the rest are based on what health for that particular type of eating is. And then we give you the red, yellow, green of the sustainability of that item based on the average carbon. So it's just to help you directionally. And then you can leave a recommendation of the item, rather than the place. Because sometimes, so like I really like pad thai, but I have to say here in Spain, they don't make American pad thai. I mean, geez Louise.
How could they not?
I mean, hello, I know. Goodness gracious. But so I've tried like probably 10 pad thais, right? But I don't want to rate the restaurant poorly because it's not their fault that like they don't make American pad thai. Exactly. That I like have my American decision of what pad thai tastes good. But I do want to remember, like, did I like that thing there? So this way we can both help people remember, did you like this or didn't you? And then down the line, we can say, oh, other vegans like this, or other people eating keto like that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And you talked about all the other ways you can continue to expand into a complete holistic experience. But what's really interesting is we talked through how that can save not only a lot of time and a lot of input, but if you're there with somebody to have a conversation, or you're there with 3-4 people, you bring up all this time where you can communicate with, you have that person for 1 hour, maybe, and you don't have to spend 20 minutes of it digging through a menu to debate. And I think the Cheesecake Factory was the option we used.
Oh my
God,
I can't. Well, I was actually just thinking about this because I'm a millennial, and maybe this is a millennial thing, but like all of my friends joke when we go out, we send each other this meme of like, you go to a restaurant and you open the menu, like pretending like you haven't looked at the menu 10 times already to figure out what you're going to get before you get to the restaurant. So I love that, like, for me and my friends, this would be like amazing because it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about the mental load before I even go to like source a menu. I just know that I can open the app and get my 3 great options. Like, that's really good. That would be amazing. Then I just focus on my friends.
Exactly. And it's cognitive load. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. We're trying to reduce the cognitive load because that's what it takes. It's like, I don't want to freaking have to deal with this. I would just tell me. I say,
just tell me what to eat.
Like, exactly. I'm quite a feminist, but I'm single just with my dog. And sometimes I think like, gosh, I don't like going on dates, but if I went on a date, I kind of want to go on a date just to not have to decide what I want to eat. I'm just gonna be like, just order for me. Not that not very feminist, but sometimes I don't want to make a darn decision. Somebody decide for me. I'm making decisions all day. So this is like, just
someone choose my meal.
And you don't have to. Exactly.
Yeah, decision paralysis is real. I think we went through a program years ago when we were in corporate America, and there was the big takeaway is that from that is, once you get to a higher level, you're making about 100 important decisions a day. And by the time you get to the end of that day, the decision of where you eat or what you have or what you're going to go do, you've depleted your ability to make interesting decisions. 100%. And so it becomes really, really draining.
And I wonder if I mean, I don't wonder, I think I know, but like when you're so exhausted from making all these decisions, you're making bad ones. Maybe you're going into the fast food, you're going into the McDonald's or the Chick-fil-A or Burger King or whatever and picking up that item because it's easy rather than, maybe spending a few more minutes thinking, okay, what if I cook the salmon, it'll take 12 minutes, 14 minutes, but it'll be healthier. It's so hard to do that when all you've done all day is made those 100 big decisions.
Exactly. And if you're imagining you have, I mean, I just imagine my brother and sister-in-law have 4 children.
Oh my
Imagine that you're
gosh.
also making a decision for 4 children. Like,
No,
okay,
couldn't.
like making a decision for my one dog is enough, right?
Right.
For me and the dog. Like, you baby, figure out what you want to eat yourself.
So I think it's
That way,
no, it's a really
unfortunately.
good application. It's something that there's a need. It's if Yelp spent less time being shakedown artists and more time adding value, this would be a great feature to
Exactly.
ride on top of that even. So yeah, really fascinating.
Exactly.
I think that's great. And then from there, you're continuing to grow and scale this business. And what does the future look like?
Yeah.
What does the next 12 months look like for you?
Well, getting it out there for the beta. So end of the month, the beta will go out for my like select folks. But I'm really blessed that I have a great network from having lived in 16 cities, and a lot of folks who are like product people or that will lovingly tell me this is not working, or this is great, blah blah blah. And then just I'm pretty. I think that it's important to let it live a little bit before you jump in and like do 100 different changes just to get a bit of a pulse. It doesn't mean obviously bugs aren't being done or that you're not developing from things that you're seeing, but so definitely going to let it do that. And then with LLMs, there's so much stuff now that you can add in relatively easily that may fit different pieces. I mean, ultimately, I really believe that like to help people make healthier choices, you have to understand 3 main things: agency, urgency, and opportunity. And now with data sources that are also important. So like the weather actually really impacts a lot of people, but almost everyone also. Like, okay, are you going to take a walk when it's pouring down rain? Or, you're probably going to eat a little bit more comfort food when it's cold. Like taking these various data sources together to help to try to make recommendations outside of just when you're at the restaurant, but other parts of your life to help optimize for those healthy choices. And no guilt, no like you should have done better, none of that. No, it's not at all about like appearance. It's all about making the right healthy choices for yourself. And I really believe those are all super, super individualistic as well. Like it has to be personalized, because what works for me with a dog, and my background and my genetics and all that good stuff is not going to work for probably anyone else.
I think in that non-templatized approach, that personalized approach is what people are craving right now. And like Lauren, you talked about this a lot when you were looking at personal trainers. Like you have the template trainers, right? That try to make it look individualized, but it's a template that they're copying and pasting with no regard to who you actually are and what your needs are and what your injury history might be.
Yep.
100%. It's you can buy a template online, but they don't know that like maybe you tore your labrum and you can't do any of these things. And so that programming with a personal trainer is what makes it so much more effective. And you're going to see those results. But with that, it takes a little more time, maybe costs a little bit more, but the outcome is going to be better. And so it's getting people to understand that like, okay, like there's a little bit more things that have to be done up front, but it's going to be a better result.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think
and different genetics, right, are so different. Sorry, go ahead there.
What you're doing is like the era of mass personalization. Like all the timing is coming together to enable you to really deliver that to your audience. And we're really excited to see it. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing. It's definitely a product that we would use, or a service that we would use as well. So we're excited to see it get into beta and get launched. So that's what the next year looks like for you. Beta, test, iterate, test, iterate, test, iterate is probably your next 12 months.
Exactly.
So beyond that, what is the most exciting thing for you as the next feature, the next add-on beyond the food piece? Are you going to focus right there, or do you have like in your brain, do you have, this is what I want next?
Well, there's a couple other facets that are like relatively low-hanging fruit as far as like, so when you think about what you can optimize for your sleep, for instance, they're like the inputs, right? So the main things that impact sleep are like whether you've exercised, how late you have caffeine, your like light, your temperature. So there's probably like a sleep scientist would totally probably want to disagree with me, but there's a more manageable kind of sector of things that impact sleep, as opposed to like there's 80 billion exercises you can do, right? Like there's so many different things. So there's a couple things that can probably be that are integrated a little bit easier to try to do recommendations that are still looking at data, but that aren't as robust as like, again, like understanding how people movement, etc. So I do see introducing another facet of holistic health that impacts. The other thing we looked at was so different types of nutrients, like maybe as you start to look at like restaurant, then looking at what you're eating at home, maybe you're not getting enough iron, or maybe you're not getting enough vitamin B. So that those are kind of the spaces that I'm thinking, but it'll be totally dependent on like how people are using it, what's most important to them, user research. But to me, it's getting to that integrated piece where these looking at how all those facets go together.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're coming up to the section where we gave you a heads up on it. It's like, if you could have dinner with yourself, speaking of the fact that, we're talking about eating at restaurants and having.
You've already made your choice from the app.
Yeah,
You've already dialed it in.
And we know I won't get a word in edgewise.
That's pretty funny. So you can choose between the 18-year-old and 25-year-old version of you. You get to have dinner. What do you say to yourself? What do you say to that person over the course of that conversation?
Good governor. So one of the things that I think I would have pushed myself more on in university was actually doing some like more advanced physics and math, as opposed to, because, and like, I don't think this is, again, I'm not sure how much it was like the time or whatever. Both of my parents were social workers. Adore them, love them to death. That's the reason I am big, that I am. But they weren't like scientists, right? They both have they both did their masters in social work and psychology and all that good stuff. I mean, bless my mom's soul, she's 72 and she can explain artificial intelligence because I have like worked with her, right? She said to me the other day, I was like telling her about like RAG and LLM. She goes, 1 second again. What does an LLM stand for again?
Aww.
I know it's that ChatGPT thing, but I was like, it's okay, Mom. Large language model. So I know, it's so cute. But anyway, so I didn't get pushed towards like, hey, these computer things, right? They are probably a good thing to. I was thinking the other day, I don't think my dad ever even looked at a computer, because he died when I was 12. So that's 30 years ago. He had ALS. We had that. They tried that horrible vision board, but because I was talking about these neural implants, and I was like, I just feel like my dad would be like, I don't really want everyone to know when I think like, oh, I've really got a fart or something.
Yeah.
That is still my dad too, by the way.
Privacy.
But anyway, sorry. Yeah, totally. Anyway, I digress. So I think I would be like, hey, I know you have ADHD and sitting in front of a computer screen coding makes you want to cry, right? But think like, why don't you do physics? Like, I did take physics, right? Like, I love theoretical physics, couldn't stand mechanical physics, but like, I would be like, hey, push through that. Why don't you like get yourself in front of a laptop? You're reading books all the time. Just do the basic like computer science, because even though I know more about AI than a lot of people who did a computer science degree, I still get, oh, well, who's your technical co-founder? And it's like,
yeah,
bro, I'm my technical co-founder. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Like, do you want to go up? Do you want to talk about how many models I helped influence? Like, let's have a chat, because it's more than you. But I think it would have helped me. I would have validated, right? At least, again, I've written my like architecture diagrams. I can do all that stuff, but it would have given me the validation that sometimes is still looked for. That for sure. And then the other part, I think I've always had a lot of confidence. And I didn't come across like, I think a lot of the challenges in my career until I was probably in my 30s. So I would probably have given myself like, hey, by the way, it's going to get hard. And like, it's really not your fault. Like, just keep remembering that it's not you. They just make you think it's you. Like, but it's not. Keep on going. I think that's probably the thing.
I think, Lauren and I came from a large tech company too. And what starts to happen is you get this bimodal split pretty early on between like the apex predators and then the people that like get consumed. So it's a really tough space to be in sometimes, because as you're trying to navigate that, you have to make some very difficult decisions, and you feel attacked, even if someone might not even be really attacking you. That's just the execution operational model, and it's different. It's different to navigate.
Yeah.
But yet, to your point about large language models and a bunch of the AI things that are coming out, your background in product management uniquely positions you to be able to fall into, how do I build a requirements document? How do I execute through a requirements document? Even without a computer science degree, you don't necessarily need that to be able to understand how these products come together. And I push my sister a little bit into product management. It's like everyone should have that experience, because it unlocks a lot of doors for you, even if you don't have the math degree. I have a sidebar.
Exactly.
I have a real problem with the way a lot of technology is taught, or math is taught at the college level. My sister just went through calculus at MSU, and so
I took Calc 3.
So like I had to help her basically get through it. And so I'm like, oh man, like they don't teach you why. They'll teach you how to take a derivative, what the puzzle is to unlock it, to get it, but not teach you what that represents. Like, and then, well, that's the basis of stochastic gradient descent, which is an optimization algorithm for everything that's AI. And so if you knew that you're taking the tangent line to the curve, if you knew what was actually happening, you'd be able to mentally walk through how to solve the math problem easier, versus use this formula, plug it in, like, and get the answer. It's like, you don't know what that represents. So they don't teach people what that represents. Even when you get to Calc 3, so that's what multivariate vector calculus. Like, you can take a Jacobian matrix, but they're not telling you what that means, what it represents. What does divergence and curl mean? Which is a huge problem, because without the applicational knowledge, it doesn't matter that you can calculate it. You don't know what it's doing. And
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't become real. It's not like there's not, I mean, but mine was more in the context of applying it to health and science, because of obviously at Hopkins. But, I mean, I love math and science. Like I was a nerd. I was telling someone recently, I think when I told you this, I used to sit on the bus at the front of the bus. Cool girl. And we would try to get to the furthest decimal point we could of square roots, like just in our brains, be like how, no, seriously, what? Who does that when they're in like second grade? Like, who does that? But I mean, I love math. Obviously, I had no idea that like what the purpose of that was either, because we're doing weird things. But I think if you like, math is fun and it's interesting, but then we make it not, because we're like, oh no, just figure out how to do this. But I do have some hope in AI helping people learn more. I was using it the other day actually to look at the transformer architecture, the LLMs, of like the 3 nonsensical things that they put in to like learn over time, backpropagate anyway. And I was like, okay, what about this? And it was so helpful. It explained it. I could then be like, oh, give me a little bit more. It explained, I mean, it was great.
Yeah, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. I'm 15 years old. Explain it to me like I have you can build your way up there. You can be like, oh, I have the intuition now, and now I can build in deeper layers of it. And I think like this huge blast of generative AI tools is making a even bigger interest amongst people in high school and college, that this is something that I want to do. Like, I don't want to be an accountant, which is, for me,
good,
that's great.
They're going away, by the way, too.
Lauren and I talk about this all the time. Anything that's repeatable and rules-based is going away. Like, and that is the pinnacle of rules-based and repeatable. So I think, Lauren, I think we're on the last question.
Yeah, we're coming up on time, but I have another question, a bonus question that I didn't ask you. But I do want to know, you're so busy, you have your own business, you're putting out this really amazing product, but when you have a few minutes, like, what are you listening to? What are you reading?
So I am like, I don't watch TV. I read. I love something about my ADHD. I can hyper focus on reading. So I'm always reading like 80 books. That's probably also part of the
That's the ADHD part.
Yeah, exactly. But I really like, so one of the things I do with my interns, actually later I'm meeting through the interns. So we all read a book together that's science-based, and then we read a chapter a week, and like included in their time, obviously. And we get together and we discuss like, what did you learn? What was most interesting? What was confusing? Because sometimes they don't have a background in the science or the math part that we're looking at, and then how can we apply it to the product. So one of that, I love doing that, and I'm actually doing an AI book club for women in Barcelona too that we're trying to do. So I'm oftentimes like reading those kind of books. So Lisa Feldman Barrett is like one of my favorites. So How Emotions Are Made, and what I'm reading with the interns right now is 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. For the AI book club, we're reading Unmasking AI because Dr. Joy, and I can't pronounce her last name, I apologize, is amazing also, and I love following her stuff. And then a lot of, so I love historical fiction too. And
Me too.
Yeah, so have you heard, there's this one author, Marie Benedict, she writes about historical female characters. She did Einstein's wife, which there's like, some people, it's controversial because some people think that she didn't contribute as much as other people do. But the history from that time is super interesting. So Her Hidden Genius is one that I'm reading right now. I love it. And it's like, yeah, it's really good because she specifically looks at like basically because back in the day, women were impacting more, back in the day. Okay, let's be honest, it's not today, but women were influencing, right, math and science the way that they could, maybe through their partners or like in their roles, etc. And so she writes about some of those, and also just I love the math and science behind it, and then also historical fiction is really cool too.
Computer science as a whole discipline was created by women. They were the original software developers and creators. Computational science with a machine was Ada Lovelace's world, right? When you think about like how software development, how computational science and math was created, you think about the implications of getting to the moon or anything that's war related, or missile ballistics was calculated with the women inside of those spaces. My grandmother's who got me into computers, which is
really, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That's amazing. And then podcasts. I love podcasts. So there's, I'm again, like always, and I try really hard to listen to both sides of the proverbial aisle. It's not quite as bad in Europe. They have more than just two sides of an aisle here, but so I listen to, quite refreshing, in fact. So I listen to a lot, like the AI breakdown is one that is pretty fast, but I like his perspective quite a bit. There's ML Ops Community, The Knowledge Project, Cognitive Revolution. Oh, what's the other one that I really like? Hold on, let me find this one before it. Possible. Really like the positive aspects of AI and technology that are coming. I mean, literally, again, I don't have children, so I just walk my dog and listen to podcasts. My poor brother, I sent him like 800. He's like, actually, I have 4 children. Like, what do you think I'm listening to these podcasts?
Narrow this down. Give me one.
He's like, could you give me an AI recommendation engine off of your, like,
Go ahead. No, I was going to say before we close off, I've been thinking about this the whole time we've been talking, because you're in Spain, you're an American living in Spain. I'm so curious, what's one unexpected difference or maybe something that surprised you about living in Barcelona?
I've learned so much just about like my own biases, and one of the things, the Catalans here is different from like traditional Spanish culture also, which has been really interesting to see those differences. I lived in Salamanca a long time ago, and I think I really, really love like how communal and familial they still are based. Like it's just on Sundays, even if they don't, they're actually not that, like, not everybody goes to church, right? It's not like everybody's going to Catholic church and then they're hanging out. But families are really, really intergenerationally living together, supporting each other, and spending time together in a way that is authentic and like not forced. And I just love that they still are so committed to supporting the intergenerations and slowing down.
Yes, I love that. And you've taken to that. Was that an adjustment, or was that, did you take to it quickly?
That is one of the reasons I wanted to live here, because I'm type A. I like to say I'm a type B wannabe. or like I'm a recovering type A. And so I love New York. Like I love New York City, but like the last thing I need is New York City space and
Right.
energy, like making me more neurotic than I already am. So one of the reasons I lived here, what like wanted to live here, was the ocean. Is I can see the ocean right now, and then the slower pace to just like live in the moment, not be so career focused, outcome focused. I mean, obviously that's important too, but like having that more of the
Yeah,
holistic.
just
And fun
balance.
fact, exactly, my parents live 3 floors above me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to. So that's so fascinating that you were able to sort of bring that intergenerational, dynamic with you.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I
I'm
love
super,
that.
super blessed. Yeah, it's really nice. And they love it too. Obviously, they also have an ocean view. So
Yeah, can't complain.
and they tolerate me. Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
I doubt it. I a little more than tolerate,
Yeah,
but oh
I
man.
know.
Well,
No, they're
Ashley, it has
great.
been such a pleasure chatting with you. I know
Yeah,
Derek
you
got to do
guys
the
too.
pre-interview, so I just kind of rolled in here and got to meet you for the first time. But I just you had so many
Yeah.
insightful things to say. Love your experience,
Oh,
and
thank
really
you.
excited to see, where your product goes, where your app goes, and we'll be on the lookout.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. It was
Thanks,
lots of
Ashely.
Thanks
fun.
for joining.
Thanks.